New York City has always seemed exciting to me, even though I've never been there. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, so the only way I got to see the city was through movies and TV shows. Last year, my childhood friend moved there for work, and we started video chatting while he walked around, showing me his neighborhood like a virtual tour. These virtual tours became the highlight of my week. I'd sit in my apartment after a long day of working from home, and for an hour or two, I could pretend I was wandering the streets of New York. My friend would point out famous landmarks, show me local hotspots, and let me experience the hustle and bustle of city life from thousands of miles away. Last Tuesday, we were on our usual video call while he grabbed dinner at his favorite Chinese restaurant. He propped his phone up at the table so we could chat while he ate. I could see the counter behind him where customers were placing orders. It was a typical evening until it wasn't. I noticed people ordering by numbers, pointing at the menu, and saying things like they wanted certain numbered items. There weren't many customers, just one guy sitting near the counter scrolling through his phone and three women seated on the other side where I could see them. Then this guy walked up to the counter holding what looked like a big red menu folder. He was tall on the heavier side and looked disheveled like he hadn't showered in days. The entitled dude loudly called for the worker's attention. When the worker responded, the entitled dude demanded to know why the prices were so high and if they had changed. The worker apologetically explained that he spoke very little English, giving a polite bow to show respect despite the language barrier. The entitled dude reacted with anger and frustration. My friend whispered to me, asking if I was listening to what was happening. I responded that I was and jokingly bet $5 that the man would go nuts. My friend laughed and told me to be quiet. I muted my microphone so the restaurant couldn't hear me, but I could still hear everything. The entitled dude began shouting at the worker, exaggerating his words as if volume would overcome the language barrier. My friend and I exchanged concerned looks through our screens as the situation escalated. The worker continued apologizing and pointing to the menu in the entitled dude's hands, trying to explain that the prices were listed there. He repeated that he had limited English skills and seemed increasingly uncomfortable. The entitled dude's frustration grew, and he began using racial slurs while demanding an explanation for the prices. The worker kept apologizing even though he'd done nothing wrong. That's when another customer intervened. The customer told the entitled dude that the worker couldn't understand him and probably couldn't change the prices since he was just an employee. The entitled dude aggressively told the customer to mind his own business. The customer suggested that if the prices were too high, the entitled dude should simply go somewhere else. The entitled dude started to tell the customer to mind his own business but cut himself off. He then began yelling again, telling the worker that this was America and he should speak English using more racial slurs in the process. What happened next made my jaw drop. The entitled dude started hitting the worker with the menu. The worker just raised his hands to cover his head while this lunatic kept hitting him. The customer expressed shock at this behavior and asked if the entitled dude was crazy. The entitled dude told him to shut up and threw the menu at the customer but missed. I could hear a woman's voice in the background saying she had called the police. The entitled dude rudely told the woman to be quiet and suggested she call immigration and customs enforcement instead. The customer questioned what the entitled dude's problem was. The entitled dude ranted that his problem was that these people come to America and abuse citizens, and then complained about people like the customer defending them. He made a threatening gesture toward the customer. The customer warned the entitled dude that he was acting crazy and that if he attempted to hit him, he would fight back. The entitled dude dismissed the threat, boasting about his fighting skills. The entitled dude tried to punch the customer, but the customer dodged. Being so heavy, the entitled dude stumbled and fell like a sack of potatoes. The customer started laughing while the worker just stood there, stunned. I couldn't see the entitled dude anymore because he fell out of the camera's view, but I could still hear him ask aggressively what the worker was looking at. Then I saw a folding chair fly over the worker's head. It hit him, and I watched in horror as he came up from behind the counter bleeding from his head. Right as the chair was thrown, police officers were arriving and witnessed the assault. An officer commanded the entitled dude to stop, calm down, and put his hands where they could be seen. The entitled dude refused, claiming he was just defending himself. The officer took out a taser and warned him one final time. The entitled dude challenged the officer's authority and walked toward him, ignoring the warning. Big mistake. The officer used the taser on the entitled dude, who dropped to the floor screaming in a surprisingly high-pitched voice and threatening to sue while using expletives. The officer reminded him that he had been warned and instructed him not to try to get up, asking if he understood. The entitled dude replied through muffled crying that he did understand but still threatened legal action. The officer accepted this but insisted he stay put. I could hear the officers calling for an ambulance. The worker seemed unable to speak English, so the police started interviewing everyone else. More officers entered and handcuffed the entitled dude, who was now just moaning on the floor as they helped him up. One officer was asking for the manager, but it looked like the worker was alone except for two guys in the kitchen. Someone mentioned there were cameras in the restaurant and they'd need to contact the owner. Then I heard someone ask my friend what he was doing and if he had recorded what happened. My friend explained he was just on a video call. An officer asked him to hang up and give a statement. The last thing I heard before he ended our call was an officer reading the entitled dude his rights. My friend called me back a few hours later to finish the story. The entitled dude was charged with assault and taken to jail. The worker needed stitches but was going to be okay. The restaurant had security footage that clearly showed the entire incident, so the entitled dude had no chance of claiming self-defense. According to my friend, the owner arrived while he was still giving his statement and was furious. He promised to press charges and get a restraining order to keep the entitled dude away from his business and employees. That virtual tour of New York gave me more than I bargained for. I'm still planning to visit someday, but maybe I'll skip that particular restaurant. The food looked good though. I've never been one to make waves, but yesterday something in me snapped. Let me give you some background. I work at a corporate office downtown, one of those places with endless meetings and spreadsheets that drain your soul bit by bit. The work itself isn't terrible, but my boss has been piling on extra projects lately because two people in our department quit last month. To keep my sanity, I started hitting the gym regularly after work. Nothing fancy, just enough to burn off stress. I share an apartment with my roommate in this decent building on a busy street. The rent is steep, but we split it, and the location makes the commute bearable. Our building has this specific setup with a garage, one driveway to enter, one to exit. The garage clickers we have will only open the entrance doors, and there is a button inside to open the exit ones when you leave. Yesterday was rough. My boss had dropped a last-minute project on me right before I was supposed to leave, forcing me to stay an extra 2 hours. By the time I hit the gym, I was already irritated. My roommate and I finished our workouts, and I was absolutely starving. That post-workout hunger where your stomach feels like it's trying to digest itself. We were driving home, both of us daydreaming about dinner, when we turned onto our street and saw it. A massive black SUV parked directly in front of our building's entrance driveway, completely blocking access. I just sat there for a moment. I expressed my frustration out loud, wondering what kind of person would be inconsiderate enough to block an entire driveway. My roommate suggested that maybe they were just making a quick stop to drop someone off, but the vehicle was empty. No hazard lights, nothing. Just deliberately parked to block our entrance. I called our landlord immediately. I asked the landlord about the huge black SUV blocking our entrance and whether it belonged to someone in the building. The landlord explained that this was the same person who had blocked the driveway earlier that day. He mentioned that he had already tried to get the vehicle towed, but since it was technically parked on a public street and not on private property, the towing companies refused to remove it. He added that they had called the police earlier, but the driver had left before the authorities arrived. I asked if I could call the non-emergency police line myself to handle the situation. The landlord enthusiastically gave me permission, saying he was tired of dealing with this repeat offender. I was halfway through dialing when something clicked in my brain. This wasn't the first time today. This person had done this deliberately, twice, knowing full well they were blocking residents from their homes. That's when hunger became petty fuel. I backed up my car and carefully parked it exactly 3 inches from the SUV's driver's side door. There was a tree on the passenger side of his vehicle, so the driver wouldn't be able to enter their car at all. I put my hazards on, called the police, and settled in to wait. My roommate questioned what I was doing, reminding me that we were supposed to be getting dinner. I assured him that we would still eat, but first I wanted to teach someone a lesson about common courtesy. We waited about 45 minutes before 2 police officers showed up. They approached my car and I rolled down the window. The officer asked if I was the person who had called about the blocked driveway. I confirmed that I was. Then the officer inquired why I had parked so close to the SUV. I explained the whole situation, how this was the second time today the SUV had blocked our driveway, how the landlord had already tried to handle it, and how hungry and frustrated I was. To my surprise, both officers burst out laughing. The officer requested that I move my car forward a bit so they could get the information from the vehicle. I complied, and they went to check out the SUV. About 10 minutes later, they returned to my car. The officer told me that I was free to go and that a tow truck would arrive in about 20 minutes, mentioning it was a slow day for them. When I asked what was happening with the SUV, the officer explained that the license plates didn't match the vehicle and were expired, resulting in 3 tickets and a tow. I grinned as I pulled into our building's garage. My roommate and I went upstairs, and I immediately started cooking tacos, occasionally looking out the window. About 30 minutes later, I watched with immense satisfaction as they hooked up that massive SUV and towed it away. My roommate commented on how exceptionally delicious the tacos tasted that night, wondering if it was just his imagination. I replied that they were indeed the best tacos ever and that nothing compares to the taste of justice with dinner. I work in pest control, and honestly, it's a pretty fun job. I get to meet all kinds of people every day, from those who are terrified of the tiniest spider to others who are jumping with joy when I arrive to handle their wasp problem. My favorite nickname is definitely the Wasp Man. It always makes me smile when people call me that. Last Tuesday, I had a productive morning. I'd already completed 2 rat jobs, 2 bedbug treatments, and 4 wasp nest removals by early afternoon. Looking at my watch, I realized it was only 2 p.m. and I didn't finish work until 4:30. Rather than wasting time, I decided to head back to the office to catch up on some sales paperwork. We get a 5–10% commission on jobs over $400, so it's always worth putting in that extra effort. I pulled into the parking lot outside our office building and was about to lock up my company van, a brand new Volkswagen Caddy Maxi, complete with our company logo on the side, when I heard a child yelling. I looked up to see a young girl loudly demanding that she wanted my van. She was running towards it with a woman walking briskly behind her. While the woman hung back, the child ran right up to my van, clearly fascinated by it. I smiled and approached her, thinking I'd explain a little about what I do. Where I'm from, it's perfectly normal to chat with children, so I started giving her my usual kid-friendly explanation about pest control. I greeted the girl and asked if she liked my work van, explaining that I used it to help people get rid of bugs and other pests. The girl completely ignored what I was saying and somehow managed to pull open the passenger door. I gently closed it, careful not to catch her fingers, and told her that she couldn't go inside the van because it wasn't safe. That's when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to find the woman standing uncomfortably close to me. She angrily demanded to know why I wouldn't let her child get in the car, claiming that since I was done with it, it was now their turn to use it. I stood there stunned for a moment, trying to process what she'd just said. Then I remembered that our office building is right next to a car rental company. The confusion suddenly made sense. I tried to explain that this was my company's vehicle with our logo on it and that we were neighbors to the car rental place, but she cut me off before I could finish. She became outraged, demanding to speak to my boss and accusing me of refusing service to a customer. She was now standing so close that I could smell the complimentary coffee that the rental place offers their customers. I attempted to stay calm despite my growing frustration. I pointed out that she could easily verify I was telling the truth by comparing the logo on my uniform and vehicle with the one above the door she had just exited. Without even bothering to check what I was saying, she accused me of lying and again demanded to see my manager. At this point, I was fed up and simply agreed to get someone. I walked into the building and found the manager of the car rental place. We'd had lunch together several times before, and I'd even sold him some pest control services off the clock. When we walked back outside together, I was horrified to see the woman sitting in the driver's seat of my van, with her child trying to climb into the passenger side. I reached for my pocket and realized with a sinking feeling that my keys were still in the ignition. The van contained enough pesticides to be seriously dangerous if mishandled. Rushing to the vehicle, I found the woman searching around for where to insert the key, not realizing that newer vehicles have push-button ignitions. I pulled her out of the driver's seat, at which point she went completely limp, making it seem like I was using excessive force. As soon as she was out of the van, she dropped to the ground dramatically and started crying that I had broken her arm and needed help. The rental manager hurried over and immediately started scolding her, explaining that this was exactly why she had been kicked out of their store earlier and that she couldn't just steal people's cars. Suddenly, as if miraculously healed, the woman jumped up and threatened to call the police. She said she would tell them that we had beaten her up and inappropriately touched her daughter, calling us disgusting names. We both laughed and pointed to a security camera that was aimed directly at that section of the parking lot. Her face fell as she realized she'd been caught on camera the entire time. Defeated, she grabbed her still crying child by the hand and stormed off, with the little girl wailing that she didn't get to go in my cool car. I secured my van, thanked the rental manager, and headed inside to finish my paperwork. It was quite the story to tell my co-workers. Just another day dealing with pest problems, though this time the pest wasn't of the insect variety. Sometimes I look back and wonder how I survived those months. I was only 19 with a 1-year-old daughter trying to escape a bad situation. That's how I ended up moving in with 2 roommates who seemed like friends at first. I met them through mutual connections. One was 24, and I'll call her the entitled one. The other was 25 and seemed nice. When they offered me a room for cheap rent, I jumped at the opportunity. We agreed to split utilities, share food costs, and divide chores. It seemed perfect for me and my baby, but I should have trusted my gut. From the first meeting, something felt off about the entitled one. She was clingy, had a short temper, and made threatening comments when angry. She mentioned having borderline personality disorder, and I tried to be understanding. What I didn't realize was how bad things would get. The fighting between my roommates was constant. They bickered during almost every conversation and had screaming matches twice a week. The entitled one would get physically aggressive, and I'd end up comforting the other roommate afterward. The stress affected my sleep and even my milk production. Not exactly the fresh start I hoped for. When I moved in, I was using food assistance benefits. I only received enough for 1 adult and 1 infant, but I'd buy food for everyone when possible. We all purchased food separately but agreed to share. I did most of the cooking the entitled one was supposed to clean, while the other roommate would leave for work. Soon, the entitled one stopped doing her chores. She would complain daily that she was too overwhelmed to do the dishes. This became her regular excuse, and somehow all housework fell on my shoulders. Then they started asking to use my benefits card for gas station runs. Eventually, they just took it from my wallet without asking. Sometimes they'd hide whatever they bought in their bedroom. As time went on, the entitled one became more aggressive. She'd exclude me from conversations and pile more housework on me. Things worsened when a new roommate moved in. He was 20, quiet but made an effort to include me in activities. The entitled one clearly disliked this. She started messing with my belongings. If I left a soda on the counter while changing my baby, she'd immediately pour it out. Once, I came home to find all my expensive breast pump equipment and lactation supplements dumped on the floor. When confronted, she dismissively told me it was gross for guests to see that stuff. Her tone made it clear she thought I should be embarrassed about having baby items visible. The final straw came when I discovered my benefits card was empty only a week after being refilled. I decided to move out. I still had my old apartment and was still paying rent there, so I started quietly packing. The entitled one noticed and became furious. She refused to speak to me and told our other roommate that I'd said they couldn't touch or talk to my baby, something I never said. When asked about it, I explained the truth and we agreed to stay civil. We were sitting together looking at videos when a text appeared from the entitled one. The message said that now the witch would try to stay, referring to me. This was clearly never meant for my eyes. That was it. I called my mother and friends immediately and decided to take everything I had paid for. I took both TVs, most of the kitchenware, the coffee table, end table, outdoor chairs, bathroom organizers, and even the plunger. I cleared out most of the food too. I announced I was leaving immediately. The entitled one couldn't believe it and asked if I was really taking all my stuff. When I confirmed yes, everything I paid for was coming with me, she called me ridiculous and insisted I couldn't take all those things. I simply told her to watch me. Within hours, all my belongings were packed into vehicles, and I was gone. The only response was nasty texts threatening to call Child Protective Services if I didn't pay another month's rent. They faced eviction, but that wasn't my problem. I didn't hear anything until recently when the quiet roommate messaged me. He had moved out too, finally understanding why I left. The fighting had worsened, the house was a disaster, and no one cleaned except him. He couldn't take it anymore and left just like I did. From what I've heard, the other roommate lost her job, and the entitled one works at a piercing shop. They're living off the other roommate's wealthy father, and their relationship is nearly over. I don't feel sorry for them. I rebuilt my life, my daughter is thriving, and I learned to trust my instincts. And last I heard, they were being evicted. Good riddance.